6 after 9, and back we go to Jerry Williams.
254-5678, 254-5678, 254-5678,
254-5678. Hello, America. This is Jerry Williams. Welcome back. With me tonight from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, it's Colonel Edward Harwood, Director Emeritus of the American Institute for Economic Research. Their material and literature has been all over the country. I read it often myself. He's with us tonight answering your questions and comments, and we've been talking for about an hour now. In case you tuned in a bit late, and if you'd like to ask any questions, just listen. We're here at 254-5678, area code 617. Let's get underway with more questions and comments for Colonel Harwood. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
I would like to speak to Dr. Harwood.
He's listening. Go ahead.
Dr. Harwood, would you say you're in agreement with the theory or the cliche that the United States government does not give anything away unless it takes something from somebody else?
Your question is, I'm not sure I understood it correctly, that the United States government can give only what it takes from someone else?
Right.
Well, of course, the government doesn't produce anything, so naturally, whatever it gives away, it takes from someone who has produced it.
Right. Now, my next question is this, which I guess is a more philosophical question. Since the government acts that way, how has it affected the family in the United States, the cohesiveness that they had prior to World War II, which apparently they don't have today?
Well, perhaps I can give a partial answer to that in this way. We speak of the great inflating as being the greatest swindle in the history of mankind. It is a swindle because it has embezzled or stolen the savings and life insurance of millions of families to an extent that very few people realize. Actually, the total amount thus embezzled since World War II is approximately $1.5 trillion. That's trillion, not billion.
Right.
Now, that huge sum of real wealth has been dissipated all over the world in gifts to India, in the war in Vietnam, to people in this country who have found some way to get funds out of the government that they didn't deserve, and in countless other ways.
So in other words, you agree that the government itself has caused the destruction of the American family through Congress to the situation that it is today?
Well, I think I would say this, that a very important factor in the great burden on the American family has been the action of the government, particularly through the continued inflating and resulting in what some people call inflation, referring to rising prices.
All right, sir, we got to get on to other calls. Thank you very much. Colonel Harwood is with us in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, with the American Institute for Economic Research. Your calls and comments at 254-5678 here on BZ Radio. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Williams?
Yes.
I wanted to ask a question of Colonel Harwood.
All right, well, you have to turn your radio off completely.
Yes, certainly. I'm sorry. It's off now.
All right.
Colonel Harwood, I'm always interested in the matter of gold. The preoccupation of the people of the world with gold is fascinating to me. Would you tell me what would happen, in your opinion, if the United States simply ignored the whole question of gold? That is to say, we pretended, as we would on a desert island, that gold would not be edible or potable, and of course it is not. What would be the effect on us if we simply turned our back on the whole rather absurd medieval concept of gold?
Well, of course, you would have to convince many people that it is an absurdly medieval concept.
What is your opinion? Is it an absurd medieval concept?
For For example, the people we just brought over from Vietnam, if you've been reading the papers recently, many of them brought with them gold.
Oh, yes, and I noticed that our businessmen, our free enterprise people, were buying their wedding rings from them.
Well,
Yes, I saw
they
that in
wanted
the
to
Times
sell.
only yesterday.
But they've also brought hundreds of $1,000s worth of gold in the form of the little slabs that are sewn into coats and so on. And so they're sold throughout India and the southwestern Asia and so on. Now, it'd be very difficult to convince those people that gold is a barbarous relic, as Keynes called it. It has actually saved their lives, so to speak.
Well, it is only because, I suppose you'll agree that it is only because of the myth that surrounds it.
No. I would say it's because it is a form of real wealth, readily transportable, readily acceptable, readily recognizable, and it lasts, and you can buy things with it.
Oh, yes. Well, these are all the classical arguments, but in fact, it's absurdly impractical, isn't it? As a meaningful object which has anything to do with economics.
Well, you know...
the real supplying of goods and services to human beings.
Well, you see, an important factor in the real supplying of goods to human beings, for example, is the maintenance of the capital that we have in business enterprises. Now, you can't maintain the capital in business enterprises unless you have a stable accounting unit.
Well, couldn't we use, sir, our present system of our present checking system or our present currency? Doesn't any currency depend only on the faith of the people in that currency?
Well, now, I think the best answer to that is this: that it's been tried again and again and again and again in the history of the world, almost without number, and it's never worked. Now, I don't know how many times you would like to see it tried before you're convinced that it wouldn't work.
Well, my original question, Colonel, was if we simply shut us... This is a question because I'm seeking the information from someone who knows more than I about the subject. If we were to shut ourselves off completely in this United States of America and ignore the matter of gold altogether, could we survive?
I think it's exceedingly doubtful that we could, for the simple reason that various other nations have in times past tried to get by with paper and they haven't been able to do it. You see, it seems to be impossible, at least thus far in the history of the world, I'll put it that way, thus far in the history of the world, it has been impossible to get any government not to overissue paper.
Well, but it seems to me, sir, that you're saying that we have almost a religious faith in something called a yellow metal.
No. It isn't a religious faith. It's just a knowledge of history.
But if I was sitting, now I'm going to say this in an absurd way, if I was sitting on a desert island with 1,000 pounds of gold bullion, but no water and no fruit on the trees, I would, of course, starve to death.
You'd probably be willing to pay all the gold for a drink of water.
Of course.
And
So doesn't this point out the
much value?
absurdity of the system of trade that we've developed, depending upon a simple metal which is not edible, not potable, not wearable, not anythingable as far as I can see, except to store somewhere. And even the storage of it becomes a little absurd because I understand that it isn't even moved back and forth when credits are accrued for a particular country, say, against the gold deposits in Fort Knox.
Oh, yes, it frequently is moved.
It is
Of
moved.
course, now it's not being moved since 1971 because we have refused to move it.
So there's really no effect at all except on paper, is there?
Well, that is not quite true, you see, because the fact that a gold standard was used at one time, and incidentally that was before World War I, not currently, not in recent years, but the fact that a gold standard was used placed a limit on the amount of paper that could be passed off as money. And without that limitation, you may be able to invent a way of controlling the politicians, but nobody else has been able to.
So you seem to be saying, sir, that that it is a yellow metal which is able to control the politicians, and the people of a given country are not able to do so.
That seems to be what
I think
history tells us.
that's an interesting commentary on something. I'm not sure what.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much. We'll return to Colonel Harwood and your questions and comments at 254-5678 in a moment here on WBZ. R.H. Stern's season-end clearance starts tomorrow in all Stern stores. All sale items have been marked down at least 25% from their last price, and sale items are just what you've been looking for. All this summer styles for vacation, for work, for fun. So hurry to Stern's and save on a summer full of fashion from R.H. Stern's tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday at all Stern stores.
He wasn't even American, but he died fighting for us. This man called Johann Kalb. Kalb was a wealthy retired man living outside of Paris when the war broke out. He came here to spy for the French, but he stayed to fight for us. And did he fight? Against Kalb's urgent warning, General Gates rashly decided to march on Camden. Cornwallis suddenly attacked and Gates fled, but not Johann Kalb. Sword in hand, Kalb led his men back in a battle. He attacked 3 times, and even when the American position looked hopeless, attacked again. Kalb received 11 wounds before he died. He wasn't even an American, this man called Johann Kalb, but when we fired the shot that was heard round the world, he heard it. And he came to fight because he knew freedom was not a cause for one nation, but for all men in all nations. Sun Oil brings you this thought about bicentennial America because we believe that the individual should stand up and be counted now more than ever.
It's 18 minutes past 9. With me is Colonel Edward Harwood, Director of the American Institute for Economic Research in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Maybe you'd like to challenge his views, ask a question. You're welcome to do so. We have some open lines at 254-5678 here on WBZ. Hello.
Hi, good evening. Jerry, I'd
Yes.
like to, if I could, return to a point the Colonel mentioned concerning silver. I understand, according to J.B. Holt, that silver is being consumed at about twice the rate that it can be produced, and it might be, therefore, in shorter supply than gold. And why would it not, therefore, be a good investment value?
Well, I think I would answer that this way, that it may well prove to be a good investment. However, if we go into a deep depression, the use of silver probably will be materially curtailed, and there might be a rather protracted period before one regained the amount of capital that he had put into the silver.
Right.
We feel that the risk there is much greater than it is in gold.
I see. Okay, thank you very much, then.
All right, thank you. 254-5678 here on WBZ Radio. We have some open lines if you'd like to ask any questions. Hello.
Yes. Colonel Harwood,
Yes?
I read your magazine. I find it very useful. I was wondering, couldn't the inflation problem be stopped, as it were, it stands at least, by simply passing a constitutional amendment which denies the government the right to print more money than it takes in revenue?
I like your phrasing of the question when you say simply pass a constitutional amendment. Have you ever tried to get one passed?
Oh, well, it seems to me that it's come to the point in the country where most people feel that the ball game is nearly out of reach, and they will be willing to do something of that nature.
Well, I'm afraid that they will reach that state of mind only when they have gone through a very difficult time. You may be more optimistic about that than I am.
No, maybe less. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Colonel Harwood this question about optimism or not. We didn't really get into it before our next caller comment. If you'd like to get with us, we're at 254-5678. You say you're not optimistic at all. Maybe you can make one of those short-term predictions now. Here's the Wall Street Journal this morning, which says, is inflation dead? That question would have sounded absurd only a few months ago, but it can be asked seriously now. Well, the fact is that inflation is fading faster than almost anyone predicted, and some analysts are about ready to write an obituary for last year's public enemy number one. How about that?
Yes, I read that this morning. And that could well be the initial reaction to the debt liquidation that may be taking place. In other words, we have created a situation, a vast pyramid of debt. And as you know, we've already had many corporations cave in or had to be helped, even cities, because of the debt situation. It's easily possible that the collapse of debt will get completely out of hand, and that Arthur Burns at the Federal Reserve will not be able to hold up all the banks that are having trouble and so on. And in those circumstances, there could be quite a drastic deflation, and by that I mean a reduction of the amount of inflationary purchasing media in use. And then that, of course, could be accompanied by falling prices and so on. But if the government keeps on with its deficit spending, that situation may not last very long, and we could get a renewed surge of inflating on a very large scale.
Well, you don't have any faith in the fact that we're heading downward in terms of the rate of inflation. You still think the same forces are at work in the country regardless.
Well, we have initiated the inflationary forces on a large scale with the government deficit spending and the monetizing of that deficit. And I should expect it to have some effect.
Well, do you feel there's any time? Do you have any timetable? I think that's what most people will be asking each other. If this man is predicting, doom and gloom in terms of our own economic system, what sort of a timetable do you figure?
Well, I would guess that there may be one more cyclical upturn before a major depression. But I don't feel at all sure that there will be. I think we may already be in the beginnings of a major depression.
What will this depression be like?
Worse than 29 to 32.
Why would it be worse when we have certain safeguards set up? The social legislation, right now in Massachusetts, I'm sure you're aware that our unemployment is at 12.5%, and we do have unemployment compensation, which does compensate somewhat, and we do have a welfare system, and we do have other so-called safeguards that do not make it like the like the 30s. So how could it emulate the 1930s?
Because we have created a much larger, you might call it an upside-down pyramid of debt, which would have to be liquidated, and far greater than that of 29 to 32. And an interesting point in that connection, of course, the collapse of that debt pyramid will be reflected in bankruptcies. And we have had an increase in the liabilities of business failures in the past couple of years, which already is substantially greater, and I'm talking about percentage increase in those liabilities of business failures. The percentage increase already is substantially greater than that of 29 to 32.
How long do you think this current upturn, if it is an upturn, will last?
Oh, I think it might last a year or two, something like that.
I know you're not a speculator, but wouldn't that be an opportunity for speculation in the market?
Well, I rather doubt it, because I would suspect that by far the most of the rise has already occurred.
Already occurred from its lows to today, you're talking about?
Yes, the stock market tends to be one of the leading indicators, and it's quite consistently a leading indicator and moves rather far in advance of the cyclical movements.
And where's it headed now, in your view?
Well, I don't want to make any short-term predictions. I would guess that if this is a cyclical recovery, the stock market might be good for a further increase, but if it is not a cyclical recovery, we may have seen the peak of the market. The only other comment I'd make in that connection is that there has been an interesting development in the last, 10 weeks. From time to time in the course of the stock market's history, you're perhaps familiar with the so-called Dow theory. Well, the Dow theory confirmations, when the industrials go to new highs and the railroads go to new highs, those traditionally indicate a continuation of the market, at least up to that point of the rise, But on occasions in the past, the railroads have not confirmed a rise in the industrials to a new high during a period of several weeks or even a few months. And on many occasions in the past, those have been significant in that they have preceded major changes in the market trend. It happened that there was such a divergence of the averages in September 29, and there has been a similar divergence in the last 10 weeks. So that it just opens the door to a possibility that the top of the advance in the stock market already has been seen. It's an interesting comment. I certainly wouldn't gamble any money on it either way.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take our next call for Colonel Harwood in Great Barrington, Massachusetts at 254-5678. Hello.
Colonel?
Yes?
Jerry?
Yes, speak up.
Oh, first-time caller from Ohio.
Fine.
All right.
And I'd like to speak to the Colonel.
He's listening.
Yes?
I recently returned from a tour of Europe, and I was amazed that they don't want our money. You have to have it changed into their currency.
Well, you see, they've taken quite a licking on our money. Like the Arabs, you know. The Arabs believed the Federal Reserve authorities and the Treasury of the United States and so on, when they said time after time in past years that we would defend the dollar to the last bar of gold at Fort Knox. You remember those words?
I do.
Yes. And of course, we stopped defending the dollar long before we'd given up the last bar.
Mm-hmm.
But the Arabs believed this, and a lot of the Europeans believed this, and so they accepted dollars. And
Well,
they've got
now-
so much of them now. They're just fed to the teeth with them. There
They
are more
won't
than
even
$100
accept the
billion.
traveler's check, and if they do, they keep about almost $2 out of that check.
What'd you say?
They won't even accept the traveler's check. However, if they do, they keep almost $2 out of the check.
Well, you see, the dollar has fluctuated rather widely, and many people, particularly in the smaller towns of Europe, have been taken for a ride. They've cashed traveler's checks, and then by the time they get the money to the bank, they discover that the dollar has fallen some more, and they lose money on it.
Well, yes, I realize that. Now then, in Italy, they will accept our money.
Well,
Gladly.
that's because the lira is even weaker than the dollar. They're eager
Now
to
then,
get...
another thing I want to know is why the banks here don't have the sheet showing the value of the currency from our currency or their currency to ours.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that question.
A sheet showing the currency. Now, I did get a sheet, but it was an old sheet, and it didn't do me any good.
I think what the lady is saying, Colonel Harwood, is why don't the banks in the United States indicate to people who are about to tour what the currency exchange is and what the problems are?
Well, you see, it changes from day to day, even from hour to hour. And most of the banks in this country are quite unfamiliar with foreign exchange dealings. It's only when you get to some of the larger banks that they have any idea what's going on.
Well, the trouble is, when you go there, you don't know, and you just buy something and hand them the money, and they take out what they want.
Well,
You can hardly blame them.
Well,
okay,
yes.
good to talk to you. Thank you very much. It's 9:30 on the Spirit of New England, WBZ Boston, Group W Westinghouse Broadcasting. We're talking to Colonel Edward Harwood, Director Emeritus of the American Institute for Economic Research in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Mr. Harwood has been advising gold for some years now. Doesn't have too much confidence in the future in terms of this economy. And any questions or comments you might have are welcome to 254-5678. Hello.
Colonel Harwood, a few minutes ago, Mr. Williams asked you whether or not any future depression that you were predicting would not, in fact, be less severe because of the social legislation that's been enacted since the 1930s. Isn't it a fact, though, that the principal effect of the social legislation was to prolong the depression rather than to, although it may help people in the short term and relieve some short-term suffering, in the long term, the income supplemental programs and things like the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which buoyed up bad corporations that were about to go bankrupt and things like that, have the long-term effect of prolonging things because they keep the market from liquidating, keep the enormous debt accumulations of debt from liquidating themselves, bring the market into balance and equilibrium again.
Now, this is Jerry. Let me just counter with this. What would we do today in today's economy if the folks didn't have unemployment compensation?
Well, you're right, Jerry.
What would they do?
people would hurt, but in the long term...
No, what would they do? Not would people would hurt is not a good response.
Well, Jerry, what the answer is, the thing is this. What do? You keep on building up the inflation.
I'm just asking you, what would people do?
Jerry, it's not my position to tell you what people are going to do.
Well, I mean, see, that's what the reason for the compensation
Jerry,
is.
My situation is this. I say that what we're doing by encouraging increases in inflation by government deficit spending, what we're doing is making the ultimate, when the bubble finally bursts in the end, it's going to be a lot worse.
Well, again, the problem exists. What would people do today in Massachusetts? In other words, we would certainly have a very severe depression if it wasn't for the fact that we have a fairly bloated welfare budget taking care of the infirmed and the disabled, the elderly,
but Jerry,
poor.
Is it better to make things even 5 times worse?
Here's the question again that politicians have to ask, and I'm going to ask Colonel Harwood the answer to this question too. What would people do?
Well, I'd rather ask Colonel Harwood whether he thinks the income supplemental programs, in fact, prolong the depression by discouraging...
And I'll counter with a second question, which will be, what would people do?
Fine. Well, I want to hear Professor
Okay,
Harwood.
fine. Colonel Harwood?
Yes. I guess the first question is whether or not the social legislation, the relief and unemployment compensation and that sort of thing, tend to prolong the depression.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
That's the question,
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think that it cannot be answered categorically. I think that there are some people, perhaps, who do not seek work, who do not adjust and try to seek other work as promptly as they might, as long as they can get unemployment compensation. There may be such people.
Well, that's not what I was referring to,
We don't know how many they are. But we do know this, that the unemployment is a reflection of maladjustments. Now, for example, the great extension of real estate credit, the piling up of debts, made possible the overbuilding of office buildings in New York City. They are way overbuilt. Now, there is no work for the hard hats in New York City who were building those buildings. I mean, a big portion of them have to shift to something else if they're going to work for a living. Of course, many of them can do other things. A lot of them came from the farms or came from other work, and they no doubt have other skills, some of them, and they will make the shift sooner or later. Now, whether the existing rate of unemployment compensation misleads them and lets them think that they can sit by doing nothing and expect to get back to work by the time the unemployment compensation runs out, building more buildings in New York City, that's a possibility, and I don't see how anyone can say it isn't a possibility.
Colonel Howard, are you familiar? Where I got this idea was from a book called America's Great Depression by Murray Rothbard. Are you familiar with that, and what do you think of it?
Yeah.
Well, are you familiar with do you think it's an accurate representation of the last depression?
Not in general, no.
I'm still asking the same question. What would people do today who are unemployed?
I think perhaps we might take a little time to comment on what happened during the Great Depression. Apparently, many people have forgotten that at that time there was no unemployment compensation, there was no relief, there was only charity, and practically rather limited charity at that. So many people had an extremely difficult time, there's no question about it. I'm inclined to believe that the unemployment compensation in and of itself need not delay the adjustments that have to be made. But I think that any attempt to prevent the liquidation of overburdened debt will delay the recovery that would otherwise be possible.
Well, what I'm especially worried about is the talk that they're having lately about renewing the old Reconstruction Finance Corporation, providing corporate welfare, so to speak. And that, I think, would be...
I'm inclined to believe that the more rapidly we liquidate the people who are too far in debt, the better off we're going to be.
Right, so you would be opposed to reinstituting the Reconstruction Finance Corporation?
Yes.
All right, good.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. We'll be back with Colonel Harwood in a moment. Your calls and comments at 254-5678.
Make your mouth a kid again with flavors that never grow old. Taste Brigham Scottish, you remembered it would. Ice cream with Jimmy's, great candy too. Make your mouth a kid again at Brigham's.
Brigham's
introduces Moonlight Savings Dime. Every Brigham store except those in enclosed malls in the financial district is now open till midnight. And to make the most of the moonlight, we're making every ice cream product 10 cents less between 10 p.m. and midnight. So do a little moonlighting. Drop into Brigham's between 10 p.m. and midnight and do a job on a sundae, a big brig, or even a cone. As long as we make it with ice cream, you can get it for 10 cents less during Moonlight Savings Time. Now through Sunday at Brigham's.
Taste Brigham's good as you remembered it once. So make your mouth again at Brigham's.
There's an old saying that money does not grow on trees. Well, at Acres and Acres, they're out to disprove that old adage. Money does grow on trees when those trees grow on land that appreciates in value year after year after year. Whether you're looking for investment, vacation, recreation, or retirement, they have the ideal spot for you only 1.5 hours from Boston. This is really choice land, too. Complete with ponds and brooks and rolling hills and panoramic views, nestled amid the lakes region of southeastern New Hampshire. And for as little as $1,500 down toward a total of $4,750, you and your family can begin your escape from the asphalt jungle to your own 5-acre world of swimming, boating, fishing, hiking, or whatever else you feel like doing. That's only about 95 cents a tree. Acres and Acres even offers easy finance plans. Now, if you want further information, write to Acres and Acres, WBZ Radio, Boston 02134, or day or night, call now, 475-6797. That's 475-6797, or write to Acres and Acres, WBZ Radio, Boston 02134. Now back to the calls and comments for Colonel Edward Harwood of the American Institute for Economic Research here on WBZ. Hello.
Hello, Jerry.
Yes.
This is Jack from Lexington.
Hi, Jack.
I tuned in late, and if the Colonel's already covered this, don't hesitate to close
That's okay.
me off.
What's the question?
I share what is apparently his concern about the future of our paper money. And not everybody can easily invest in gold. Some time ago, I put a small amount of money into Swiss francs. I've lately been concerned about the possibility that they will devalue. Has he any thoughts on that kind of a foreign currency as a hedge?
Colonel?
We do not consider any currency of Western civilization a satisfactory hedge against what is happening to the paper money, because they are all going down the same road at different rates of speed.
No currency.
That's depressing.
No currency at all.
Very depressing. Thanks so much.
254-5678. It's 21 minutes to 10 on WBZ Radio. Hello. Hello.
Hello, Jerry?
Yes, you'll have to speak loud and clear.
Hello?
We can't hear you too well.
Hello, can you hear me now?
No. Will you hold on just a minute, Kenny? Will you do something about that? We're at 254-5678. When you get the line, if it's a bad one, we'll have to call back or do something about the line. This is Jerry Williams, Colonel Harwood, and your questions and comments. Hello.
Sure. I'd like to ask a couple of questions and then I'll hang up and listen to the answers on the radio, if you don't mind.
All right.
Okay, number one, I'd like to ask the Colonel, where does he see the current cycle of the current real estate situation? And how does he see the real estate situation over the near and long term? And number two refers to gold. How does he, compare the purchase of gold coins to the purchase of, other forms of gold, like bullion, gold jewelry, and so on?
All right.
Okay, I'd like to hang up
Thank
now.
you very much. All right, Colonel Harwood, first question is about real estate, and then on to the gold coins versus bullion.
Well, the only real estate that we would consider advisable for most people is perhaps their own home or a small farm. We would not recommend any other real estate. Most real estate is involved in these tremendous debts that we've spoken about earlier, and there may well be, in fact, there probably will be a tremendous liquidation of much of the overexpansion in the real estate field has already occurred. In fact, the real estate investment trusts are in very serious trouble, including those operated by some of the nation's largest banks. Now, for the other question...
Had to do with coins versus other forms of gold?
Yes, well, coins are a convenient way to hold gold for many people, and now the Austrian 100 coronas are available at a premium of about 3 to 4% over the gold content. Gold bullion is not so readily held. In this country, you don't find it available in the same way that you do in Europe. There you can buy it like bread in a grocery in 10 gram or 50 gram or 100 gram bars, which is the size the ordinary person might readily have some funds to put into. But of course, the large bars, such as those sold at the Treasury auction, they're not much help to the average person who might want to hold some gold. So his choice, if he's going to hold it in this country, would probably be gold coins. However, we do not recommend that people keep more gold in this country than perhaps $5,000 or $6,000 worth, because we feel quite sure that when the government gets in a real jam, it'll simply seize the gold again, as it did in 1933 and as England has done recently and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next call for Colonel Harwood in Great Barrington. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you're on the air.
I'd like to ask Colonel Howard a question, if you would. Colonel Howard, how does the average small investor in America go about buying South African gold stock?
Any broker, any member of the New York Stock Exchange should be able to get gold stocks for you. And what they would do is get what is known as the ADRs, that is the American Depository Receipt. Some of the major banks buy the original gold shares and then issue against them American Depository Receipts, and those are what it may be preferable for most Americans to buy. There's a fairly good market for them.
Okay, do you if you call a broker or a brokerage house, do you ask for a specialist in gold stocks, or do you just ask for anybody, or what?
Well, it would probably be a good idea to ask for one of their men familiar with gold stocks, because many of them are not familiar with it.
Okay, I think there are a lot of people that are interested but really don't know how to go about it. I shall hang up and listen. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. 9:44 on WBZ Radio. Was it 9:46, I guess? Hello.
Hello, Jerry.
Yes?
I'd like to talk to the Colonel.
He's listening.
Colonel?
Yeah?
I'd like to ask you a little question on the debt. Where does the government get the debt money mostly? From the people, the banks?
I'm sorry, that is not coming through.
All right, we're going to have, that's the same fellow at the same phone, and we're just going to have to dispense with that particular call. And we'll be back in a moment. Let's take a short break and we'll go back to Colonel Harwood with some final questions from you at 254-5678.
Columbia Pictures and Robert Stigwood are proud to announce Tommy, the movie.
There's a man I found who'd bring us all joy. There's a doctor I found can't cure the boy. See me.
Feel me.
Feel me.
Touch me.
Touch me.
Heal me.
Heal me.
He treated deaf and blind patients before, but Tommy was the most unusual case he'd ever seen. He just couldn't be reached. There was nothing the doctor could do. Anne Margaret, the mother. Elton John, the pinball wizard. Jack Nicholson, the doctor. Tina Turner, the acid queen. The music, The Who. Roger Daltrey is Tommy. Tommy, the movie. A film by Ken Russell rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Tommy, the movie. Your senses will never be the same.
Don't miss Tommy, starting Wednesday at the Pie Alley, Boston, Cinemas in Framingham, Showcase Cinema Woburn, and Sac Cinema City, Danvers.
Fresh summer fruits growing in the California sun. Bartlett pears and peaches, juicy nectarines and plums.
Nectarines, juicy, golden, California nectarines are here, ripe and ready for you right now at your favorite fruit store.
What could be more natural than a nectarine? Try the fresh summer taste of the California sun.
Right now at Stop and Shop Supermarkets, nectarine time. All right, let's continue with the calls and comments for Colonel Harwood as we go down the home stretch here. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi. I have three questions for the Colonel, and then I'll hang up for his answers. First of all, what does he think of the purchase of gold as a detriment to capital investment? That's my first question.
Yeah, well, we're not reading this fellow right either. We have some difficulty with some of the telephone lines. There's nothing we can do about it, so we're going to just have to ring off because I'm sure I didn't hear it. And if I didn't hear it, then I'm sure the Colonel didn't. Hello?
No.
Hello?
Hello.
Next call. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Jerry?
Right.
I want to ask the Colonel what effect on the economy a lottery has, such as we have here in Massachusetts. Supposing I buy a ticket and I hit the $1 million, I don't actually get the $1 million. That goes into a bank or goes somewhere, and all I get is $50,000 a year for 20 years. It takes me 20 years to get my money, which is actually 5% on the $1 million. I'd like to hang up and have the Colonel comment on that.
All right, Colonel, how do you feel about lotteries, gambling, sweepstakes, and the methods of dealing with it in Massachusetts?
Well, I'm not quite sure what kind of an answer he is looking for. That is what his question exactly is, but he apparently wants to know why he's getting only 5% on his $1 million, or would get only 5% on his $1 million for 20 years. And I can only say that I have not investigated the details of the Massachusetts lottery, not having been interested in it myself, and I assume that that is part of the way that they operate the odds for the house, so to speak. In other words, it's a Las Vegas proposition.
It'd be
the
nice.
house always wins.
It would be nice to get the $1 million and get your own interest on it and get your own, obviously a bulk $1 million is going to net for me a lot more money than $50,000 a year.
But of course, Uncle Sam would take so much of the million.
That's true. That's true, too. All right, next call, please, for Colonel Harwood at 254-5678. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're on the air.
Hi. I have three questions I'd like to ask the Colonel, and then I'll hang up for the answers, if I may.
Okay.
Okay. First question is the purchase of gold. Now, what do you think that will have as a detriment to capital investment in the industries in general in the country? My second question is what do you think of the government fiscal and monetary policies in general? And the third question, you mentioned earlier that you thought that the Keynesian system of economics was wrong, that the basis of the theories was wrong. Could you tell me why? I don't think you got into that. And now I'll hang up for the question.
All right, Colonel Harwood, some comments on what the gentleman has asked?
All right, the first question?
Had to do with the purchase of gold and its effect on industry.
Oh, I think he was asking the possible effect on the capital of industry in the country.
Right.
Looking to the possibility that if everybody bought gold with their savings instead of investing them in the capital equipment of the country, he's wondering what then would happen. Well, I think it's a question that we really don't need to worry about the answer, because our experience indicates that a very small percentage of people who are saving money have any idea at all of using it to buy gold. Most people have no understanding of the matter, and they are continuing to save in the ordinary forms of savings banks, life insurance, and so on, without any apparent realization that the money is being embezzled from them. That is to say, the buying power of that money is being taken away from them year after year by the inflating process. So much so that, as I mentioned previously, more than $1.5 trillion has already been embezzled by the inflating process from those savings and life insurance and pension funds and so on. What was the second question?
I think the gentleman asked about Keynesian theories, and he understood, as you said earlier, that you're not in agreement with him, and that the Keynesian theories obviously have brought about what you feel is the present situation. And what would you substitute for that?
Well, we are inclined to believe that there are useful procedures of inquiry available. They have been applied by the National Bureau of Economic Research. They also have been and are being applied by our organization here. They don't have all the quick answers to our economic problems. Unfortunately, the answers are simply not available as far as we know. But the Keynesian answers, as I mentioned earlier, are based on a method of inquiry that can only be called secular revelation and not based on scientific inquiry. Consequently, it wouldn't be expected by people familiar with such matters that you would get useful results from applying them. And I think it's quite clear we're getting disastrous results. There's a much more detailed discussion of these matters in some of our publications.
All right, our next call, our final call, is coming up now for Colonel Harwood. Final two calls. Hello.
Yes, I'd like to ask the Colonel that if he is predicting a doomsday and the end of Western civilization, where is there a safe hiding place or a safe keeping place that isn't going to be affected by a collapse of all the economies.
Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Where? Great Barrington?
Well,
yes.
I will answer that question. I think that probably many people have heard these messages over the radio or read the written messages about survival plans, about personal hideaways and all that sort of thing where you could be away from rioting mobs.
Yeah.
Frankly, we don't have much hope that such hideaways would be useful. And we know that some people think maybe if you go somewhere else in the world, you'll be safe. Well, we have found a couple of countries that we think people who are retired would probably have a quiet life during their remaining lifetimes, but not assured perhaps very much longer. And we do know of a few quite wealthy people who have spent the last few years going around the world looking for a place where they and their families might go and hope to flourish in economic and safety and so on. And they have not been successful in finding satisfactory places. Frankly, I don't believe there is any place to hide. I think we are going to have to face the fact that we either straighten out the mess in our own country here, or there will simply be no place to hide.
Well, that's what I found. If you follow your scenario, then the Swiss banks themselves, which are under have no provisions to disclose what they have for assets or liabilities, and they do deal in currencies, could be insolvent themselves. And you'd have a very difficult time getting that money, and also there's a charge for storage. So I don't see any real any out other than to have money, perhaps not in gold, but into some commodity, or into land, as you say, or a house or a farm. I really don't see how gold can be that could be that assured against owning land, let's say, in a farmland.
Well, again, I can only refer you to the record of history, and of course we don't have a historical record very far back, only 2,000 years, whereas men apparently have been around for a few million years.
Right.
But for the period that we do have a record, it's quite clear that gold and gold-related assets do provide financial assurance and safety under almost any conditions.
All right, I want to get to a final call. Thank you very much. It's 6 minutes to 10 on WBZ. Colonel Harwood, a final call. Hello?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to ask the Colonel what his idea is about saving
I'm sorry,
silver.
I can't hear that.
Will you just speak a little louder, please, ma'am?
I would like to know the Colonel's opinion on saving silver.
Saving?
Coins and silver pieces.
All right, if you go back to the radio, we'll get a comment on that again. Okay, Colonel Harwood announced that a bit earlier, but we'll do it again. Colonel, the lady asks again about silver coins and silver generally.
Yes, well, for silver coins, we have recommended that people have a bag or two of silver coins just in the remote possibility that they are needed in order to swap for groceries, for example. That is as I say, we think it's a remote possibility, but it doesn't cost very much to have a bag of silver coins stashed away, and the time may come when farmers, for example, will not accept the paper money that you'd like to have them accept. And you might be able to eat if you had silver coins.
Sure. Colonel, it's been a delight to talk to you. I'm glad we did, because so many people have written to us about having you on. And where can people get information about the American Institute for Economic Research? How do they get in touch with you?
Just write to Great Barrington, Massachusetts, zip code 01230.
Well, I'm going to go look for an island somewhere. And I might be up knocking on your door. You never can tell.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night. Colonel Edward Harwood, Director Emeritus of the American Institute for Economic Research. Many millions of people follow the advice of Colonel Harwood and have. And he evidently, since quite sincere about his views, nobody can say that we don't have free market theorists and laissez-faire types on the program, and the Colonel is one of those. News is next here on BZ. The Spirit of New England, WBZ Boston, Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting.
And Boston's temperature now down to 66 degrees. The outlook for tonight, we'll have cloudy skies and foggy along the coast.